بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا ربنا زدنا علما نافعا آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this second bonus session as we read through the etiquettes of fasting and some of the inner dimensions, some of the spiritual realities from the works of Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani, and then ultimately we'll do a reading from Shaykh Abul Hasan Ali al-Nadwi, rahmatullahi alayhim. May Allah have mercy on all of them. Obviously the last one is a more recent scholar, the other two are classical scholars. Imam Ghazali nearly 900 years ago, and Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani a little bit more recent. We covered, in the last session we spoke of, and it's quite famous, I think people are quite aware of Imam Ghazali's tripartite breakdown of the fact that you have these three modes of fasting: the fasting of the common person, the fasting of the special people, and the fasting of the very special people. And that how fasting in different ways transcends the physical, that the fasting of the limbs, and then the fasting of the heart, the fasting of the senses, the fasting of all of these things have to be all entirely obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the giving of self, giving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala priority of self. I heard a good framing of sabr recently from Shaykh Suhail Hanif, who said something very nice. He said sabr is basically when you give priority to everybody over yourself. And then ultimately, sabr for the sake of Allah is that you give priority to God and the Prophet ﷺ over yourself. That you put yourself at the back of the queue. You're the least important person in this room. Your needs, your hunger, your thirst, your sexual needs, even your desire, if you take fasting to the senses, your desire to listen to music, your desire to watch things or movies or whatever it is, all of these, they have no priority. They are of no importance. All that's important is Allah. That you are in obedience to Allah. That you are in subservience to Him. What's the most beautiful thing about the fast? Like we mentioned in the last session from Imam Sha'rani, it's that He told you to fast. So you do it for Him. And that's it. That's the obedience. It's the baseline, but it's the most beautiful aspect of the fast is divine control. But today we're going to look at some other aspects. And so this is obviously where it's from. Today's session, Unveiling the Secrets of the Soul's Fast. These are bonus sessions. These are not in the Laṭā'if al-Ma'arif of Ibn Rajab, though some of them are mentioned there in passing, some of the concepts and ideas. Today, we'll start with this reflection, and this is actually going to take up a large amount of the session, is both Imams, Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani and Imam al-Ghazali, one of the things they really dislike and they complain about in their time as much as they complained, as we complain about in our time, is the fixation with food. It's very ironic, really, that Ramadan comes in and it should be the month in which food becomes the last thing on your mind, that it becomes the least of your priorities, that you're not worried about it at all. Allah says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may become God conscious. He says, شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنِ. He says things about the Qur'an. The Qur'an was revealed in this month, so there's this intimate link between the Qur'an and Ramadan. We know about the Prophet ﷺ and his practices in this month, and instead, suddenly, for some reason, the month that should be utterly, really, in terms of our thinking, should be devoid of food, becomes the month that is about everything, about nothing but food. It just becomes food focused. Food culture takes over, and this is obviously in my class I'm going to deliver. I'll probably deliver it by the time this is released. At Karima, we're going to talk about this. There's some reflections, because suddenly even the takeaways, they take advantage of this. Taraweeh deals and iftar deals and all of this. And suddenly the focus at the time of iftar, which should be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ said, لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَتَانِ, the fasting person has two moments of great happiness. The first is عند فِطْرِهِ, at the time of opening his fast. He should be pleased that Allah is feeding him. And he remembers all of the pleasures are from God. He remembers Allah. And that his du'as are accepted in this moment. And instead, he's so fixated, well, I need to make sure the food comes on time, and I need to make sure I eat, and I get my 7 courses, and I drink this, and I eat that. And like I mentioned before, I have a checklist of all the foods I need to consume over this month of Ramadan, not how many surahs I need to learn, or what aspects of the Qur'an I need to focus on. Shaykh Suhail, another beautiful point he made. He says, angles. It's all about Qur'an angles. If you haven't learned the tajweed, learn the tajweed in this month. If you haven't learnt the tafsir of a certain surah, go learn the tafsir of that surah. Go read a tafsir you never read before. do some engagement with the Quran. Every single day, you should have a level of engagement with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on some capacity. Obviously, I'm preaching understanding, but even if that's not your remit, it doesn't matter. You go for something else. But if you become fixated, that all you're thinking about is food, 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 food. What am I going to eat? How am I going to eat it? When am I going to eat it? Why am I going to eat it? Da, 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 da. Or the why goes flying out the window because we don't think about why we eat. We just think about eating. Then what have you actually done? Because sabr, like Imam al-Ghazali mentions, is the battle of the beast and the soul. That's the war. There's a war. They're fighting. They're clashing every single day. Your job is to give victory to the soul, to give victory to the angelic. Instead, somehow this month comes in and suddenly we gorge. We eat suhoor that is equivalent to 75 days of fasting. Iftar, you got to make sure you get your oats and your potassium and your this and your electrolytes and your high. Suddenly you have like sports scientists coming out saying this is how we're going to make sure you don't feel the fast. You know, we spoke about this in the last session. We have to feel the fast. We have to feel the fast, the thirst. We have to feel thirsty. People are like, oh, we're going to get this drink, you drink it, you're never going to feel thirsty. A'udhu billah, what is this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the day of judgment we'll get that drink. We don't want it right now. We want to be thirsty. We want to taste. I want to feel something of the fast. That I'm doing this for my Lord. Jalla fil ula. You know, maybe, I don't know. So it's just these reflections. We need to do some reflections. And Imam al-Ghazali and Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani their reflections will guide our reflections. So let's start with the great Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. May Allah mercy on him himself. He says, so Imam al-Ghazali says, what use is the fast as a means of conquering Allah's enemy and abating appetite if at the time of breaking it one not only makes up for all one has missed during the daytime, but perhaps also indulges in a variety of extra foods. So he's saying the whole point is that you're disconnecting from dunya. The whole point is that the nafs is taking an absolute beating. The whole point is that you're weakening it, you're controlling it, you're learning self-restraint, some self-discipline, you're becoming more angelic in your reality. And then suddenly, as soon as the adhan goes for Maghrib, you're gorging yourself. You defeat the purpose entirely. This is the point they're all making. You're defeating the purpose. That the iftar, now nobody's saying that the fast needs to carry on into iftar. That's obviously not true. That's not right. You need to eat because that's a farha, that's a moment of happiness for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you food to eat. But what Imam al-Ghazali is saying, and he's quite strict on this, and some of the ulama later did say that his position is a stricter position. But he's saying, at least be conscious and careful at the time of iftar of what you're doing. Because you need to, Ramadan is the month. You see, that is the whole month. It's the whole 24 hours of the day is Ramadan. Now the fast is obviously from dawn until sunset. This is true. But that doesn't mean that Ramadan stops being Ramadan at the time of iftar. There still has to be that extra God consciousness, that awareness, that recognition. And one of the things many of the ulama are going to speak about is that you can't let yourself lose sight of the larger purpose of the month of Ramadan through everything else that's going on. So you're hungry, all of these things, you will feel hunger, you will feel thirst, but you need to, even at the time of iftar, there has to be some slight self-restraint, that you don't become incredibly, because what you've done, you've restricted the devil's access to you through the veins, you've managed to weaken the nafs, and over the month, you need to weaken that nafs so much that when the night of power comes, you can have great unveilings. If you don't do that, then you've missed the point completely. And what happens with a lot of people, and this is like they've got studies and stuff, that people just put on more weight, they become more obese, and obesity is a Muslim crisis, it's a major problem. And if you're fat and obese, being slightly chubby, I don't know, but being obese is not, that there's no way you can justify that, Sha'r'i. And being that fat, that you can't even move, that you can't even, I don't know, play with your kids, that you're, it's also a sign, obesity is a sign of gluttony, and it's a sign that you've eaten somebody else's food, essentially. I think there's a statement of one of the Imams like this, that there's a man, like the man who bought meat, and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said to him, why'd you have meat? And he said, istahaytuhu, I desired it, so I bought it. And then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said, أَوَاشْتَرَيْتَ كُلَّ مَا إِشْتَهَيْتَ, do you buy everything that you desire? And then he said, isn't it better that you tighten your stomach and you feed your brother? That's what happens. Like if you're gorging yourself, that means somebody else isn't getting food. And Ramadan is a month of generosity. You should be giving to others more so than you're giving to yourself. And Ramadan is about worship, and it's about Quran, and it's not about food. And this is part of the crisis, the modern crisis, the commercialization of Ramadan, the secularization of Ramadan. That Ramadan, it's all surface level now. The spiritual reality becomes ignored. Instead, people are fixated on suhoor parties and iftar this and that and whatever they can get, and it becomes all about the veneer, the decorative veneer of Ramadan. And maybe on a level for some people it has to be that, and that's fine, because that's where they are in their journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can't be too judgmental of them. We have to invite them to our space, and if they come, they come, and if they don't, they can stay in their own space and eat samosas, and Ramadan is about samosas. But we're trying to be transcendent. We want to teach our children, we want ourselves to enter into the great realities. When we're going to reflect on the night of power, that world, that day, that moment, that night, that when literally it's heaven on earth. So I just want that point, it becomes heaven on earth. And what did the statement of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, that what of a man who Laylatul Qadr comes in and he's busy eating, he's fixated on food, then he will be afflicted with a disease from which there is no cure. This is the statement of Sayyidina Ali from the Laṭā'if. And so so that's one frame. This is the frame. We need to bear this in mind. This is Imam al-Ghazali again. It has even become the custom to stock up for Ramadan with all kinds of foodstuffs. They get the preparation. What is the preparation for Ramadan? Got to fill the freezer. Now I'm going to make 2 points. Number one is that obviously there is an element you have to eat in Ramadan. And so there is something of stocking up food. But he's saying they are more fixated on what food they're going to eat in Ramadan than they are on the worship they're going to carry out. That's the point he's trying to make. And I say this, inshallah, especially where we are now, where iftar time comes in, literally people will be waking their way home from work. It's a difficult moment. And I think any family that forces their women folk to spend the majority of Ramadan in the kitchen, that is dhulm. That is dhulm. That's just horrible. That's a horrible thing to do to somebody. That they spend their entire day, they're fasting just like everybody else is fasting. A lot of women work now, I don't know, whatever your positions are on work, but they're, whatever they work, they do these things, they come home, and then on top of that now, they have to now prepare a 7-course meal for iftar. And this doesn't, because then they have ibadah. This is, even the menstruated woman has a share of the Laylatul Qadr, according to the Imams of the Salaf. This is a statement they have. Everybody has something to catch in the month of Ramadan. And you deprive somebody else of their Ramadan for the sake of what? For the sake of not just, I'm not saying like, you can even eat relatively well. But it's this gorging idea, that there's this, if there's not 3 courses or 4 courses and there's not a dessert and there's not a this and a that, it's as if you haven't fasted. That's the problem. If there is all of that, that means you haven't fasted. That's what Imam al-Ghazali is saying. He's taken a strict position. Others will say no, let them eat, because they've tasted something of the fast. But the main worry is if it distracts you from the purpose. That's the problem. That's the problem that Imams are also going to dwell on in a second. The spirit and secret nature of fasting is to weaken the forces which are Satan's main means of leading us back to evil. It is therefore essential to cut down on one's intake to what one would consume on a normal night when not fasting. Imam al-Ghazali is saying just stick to normal food, what you would eat normally. And there has to be a strong reflection on culinary habits in the month of Ramadan. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't a gorger. The Sahaba weren't people who used to overeat. After the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, when they reflected on the food that they were able to eat, they would cry and they'd say the Prophet ﷺ never got any of this. Months on end, nothing cooked in his house. And so instead, you're seeing, it's just a strange culture. It's a gluttonous culture. And I say that as somebody who's embroiled in it. And I'm really trying to teach myself, I need to step away from this. Takeaway culture, eating at horrible times, eating a lot of meat, being fixated that everything has to be meat oriented. You can't eat anything else. Many of the Sahaba, they survived in jihad. I'm not even talking in their homes. In jihad, they would survive on dates somehow. I don't know. These are maybe they're like supernatural beings and they have physical prowess that you can't even imagine. But that's the point. There's something that these Imams are reflecting on here. In their time, this is like 900 years ago, and it's like nothing, everything's just the same, just repetition. Imam Sha'rani, may Allah have mercy on him, in his reflection, the benefit of fasting cannot be gained except with extra hunger that goes above and beyond the hunger that is typically felt outside of Ramadan. Now listen to this. Whosoever fails to increase his hunger, this is the idea. The Ramadan has to be harder than outside of Ramadan. If you can't tell the difference between a fast of Ramadan and then you doing like a Monday fast or a white day fast in the month of, I don't know, in the month of Rajab or something, then you've missed the point. You are not experiencing Ramadan. This is not Shahr al-Sabr. This is Shahr al-Yusr. This is just the walk in the park. Ramadan should be, you should try yourself. You know what your limitations are. You just push yourself to a degree where you're actually in a state of struggle. Whosoever fails to increase his hunger in Ramadan is indistinguishable from the non-fasting person, since he has not restricted the pathways through which Satan moves. And so he still, according to many ulama, maradadu shayateen, like we're going to read or we read, it's the most evil of the devils, the most wretched of them, they're the ones locked up. But there's enough of them around, according to some of the scholars, that he's still playing his games, they're still playing their games, the minions are still out, they're still doing their thing. And all of the other things, because if hunger, as the Prophet ﷺ said, if a man has a sexual desire, then he should fast, and he's not able to control himself. Why? Because the stomach and the private parts are connected. So then suddenly at iftar time, you gorge yourself, you're lethargic, you feel weak in the sense that you can't move. Now you need to go, you don't really want to go pray Taraweeh because you have to stand for a long time. You just want to lie down on the sofa and do nothing. You want to scroll on your phone. Then you don't go Taraweeh. Then you end up going into the domain that you shouldn't be watching or listening to something you shouldn't be listening to. And the stomach has caused all of that. The stomach then becomes, there is no vessel more abominable in the sight of Allah than the stomach. Sharru wi'a'in, according to the hadith, there's nothing more that you can fill, more wretched a vessel a man can fill than his stomach. So this is what Imam Sha'rani is saying, that you have to, there has to be a reorientation in how you even think about food. You have to have a reorientation on how you have to think about food. Where does it come from? Why am I eating this? What's the purpose? Is this food even halal? Is it rizq? Is it going to be beneficial for me? What am I going to use the energy of the food for? And there's a lot of these reflections, Ibn Arabi says the animal that died for you was a remember, he used to remember Allah. Now his remembrance has vanished from the earth. It's now in your stomach. It's your job now to bring his remembrance to life. So I'm saying there's a lot of reflections we have to do on food culture, but this is just, some reflections from the Imams. This is Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani. Listen to this. When someone consumes an assortment of food and drink and enjoys varieties of fruits and overeats at night and enjoys kanafa and other desserts or eats fried cheese, I never had fried cheese, and then eats a similar amount, maybe fried cheese like pizza or something, and then eats a similar amount in the early morning pre-fast meal, suhoor, this person's body opens up extra pathways for the devil. So Ramadan is worse. It's worse. You become worse. And this is why, because people forget, they think it's just eating, but eating is not disconnected from all of the other actions. This is the point. Like there's this point, I think Sa'd Yaqub or somebody put a post, the secularization of Ramadan or the secularization of the fast. So the fasting, it becomes this materialistic thing. We do it for the poor, and it's this Marxist activist thing that we do. And then on top of that, it's like we don't even concede the fact that our physical actions have an effect on our soul. We sort of forget that point entirely. Say, like, I did the 3, I didn't eat and drink and have sexual intercourse between the hours of the fast, therefore now it's fair game. Not realizing that one of the ways you stop yourself from sinning is to stop the devil from accessing you. And how does he get to you? He uses food. He uses everything. He uses everything to get to you. But food is one of his most powerful tools. He'll make you eat the wrong thing. He'll make you eat fast food. He makes you eat food from sources that are, doubtful, that they have, he makes you drink Coca-Cola or something, and he just wants you, that's not important. So what? You live in the UK, brother, so what's the point boycotting or whatever? And so he starts to undermine, and he starts to play, and food is just one of his just a toy that he plays with. And so now you've eaten more, now the night is a scary place, because God knows the devil will come to whisper, and he'll start to play with you. And you've given him access, and your mentor this whole month is about removing him entirely from your life. Whosoever looks, this is Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani, whoever looks with the eye of spiritual insight will realize that all of the days of fasting leading up to Laylatul Qadr are like a preparation and purification of the heart so that it can be suited to behold Allah during that night. It's all about Laylatul Qadr. It's all about the night of power. It's all about whatever night that is. I mean, we're going to do the sessions where we're going to look at some of the more advanced, the more detailed opinions of the ulama on when the night of power is, what happens on the night of power. But we all know that this is a wondrous night. It's a magnificent night. This is a night unlike any other night. No night in human existence can compare to the night of power. The access you have to your Lord, the ability to just change destinies. That's why one of the reasons why they call it Laylatul Qadr, the changing of destiny. And every single day of fasting that precedes the 27th, the 24th, 25th, whatever it is just a preparation for that night. The whole of your life is a preparation for that night. And you just have to be prepared. Now, if you just rock up to that night, that's just a reflection. If you rock up to that night, you haven't done any preparation, you're going to fall short. You're going to mess up. That's just going to happen. Failure to prepare is preparation to fail. But one of the ways Imams Sha'rani is saying every single night that leads up to that night, you need to be preparing yourself. One of the ways you prepare yourself is you start to divulge yourself for food. You move away from food, from the dunya, because you want that night to be just about you and Allah. Not thinking, oh, I had that amazing burger the other day and then I'm going to have another burger and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I feel like Ramadan is an opportunity, really, because if you look at the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, and you read Imam al-Ghazali in the Ihya Ulumuddin, the book Kitab Adab al-Akl, the book on the etiquette of eating, and Ramadan is a chance to bring many sunnahs to life. I had a brother, he was like, Ramadan is the only month in which I pray Qiyam al-Layl. He said this to me. I was like, Subhanallah. And for the Prophet ﷺ, it was wajib. He used to pray Qiyam al-Layl every single night. So for 1 month, you have a chance to actualize prophetic realities. You do. We do. We all do. I do. To eat like him, to move like him, to talk like him, to fast like him, to try read Quran like him, to do everything like him, so that we can have a taste of a semblance of something that his people felt. And instead, Laylatul Qadr comes in, the night of power, whenever it is, and that's part of the mystery. You don't know when it is. So you don't know, you could be caught, I don't want to use, you get caught doing the wrong thing at the worst possible time. And if you're disobeying Allah on the night of power, then what a horrific state of affairs you find yourself in. And so you don't want to be the guy, the night of power comes in and your focus is on burgers. Most of the distinguished personalities of this age, Imam Sha'rani, he's reflecting on the ulama and the awliya of his time. Not to mention others are drowning in what we mentioned. The entire month of Ramadan passes them by and their hearts are increased in darkness. Increased in darkness. Because they're not doing the jihad of the day and the jihad of the night that Ibn Rajab al-Ḥanbalī talks about. Due to excessive food and sleep. They're sleeping more. Okay, I sleep a lot in Ramadan, so I feel like this is a bit of an attack. But this is just, so maybe we need to now, because you're wasting the time. The moments are passing by. You haven't managed to take advantage of them because you're asleep. But you still remember, if the alternative is to sin, Sawmun Na'imi Ibadah, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the sleep of the fasting person is worship. Because you're protecting yourself from falling into sin. In the days of old, this is Imam Sha'rani reflecting on the Imams of the Salaf. In the days of old, a believer would come out after fasting the month of Ramadan, and due to the intensity of purity that he would gain through the successive acts of obedience, because Ramadan forces you to worship Allah, studying Taraweeh, and you're fasting, and you feel like you're staying away from sins that you would normally commit, and so you're just in this state, you're reciting Quran, it's just you're in worship, you're caged in in worship of Allah. It's just an amazing idea. And due to the intensity of purity that he would gain through the successive acts of obedience and abstinence from sin, he would know people's thoughts. You can read minds through spiritual unveiling. Like, that's the nature of the early Imams. That's like the Sahaba, they could do this. That's Ramadan that's the spiritual reality. They would be so affected by the spirituality of Ramadan, they would come out as like entirely different people. So this is, just, again, food. We have to rethink everything. Luqaymat. We're going to come to the narration in a second. Enough to keep your back straight. Now, I'm not saying that's how much you need to eat, but I'm saying just be conscious that the entire culture of your Ramadan doesn't revolve around food. That you didn't listen to a single tafsir, you didn't read any Quran, you didn't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any extra way. And that's a crazy thing, because a lot of people are like, oh, I can't, brother, I don't have time, I have work, I have this, I have that. But somehow everybody's got time to eat like an absolute monstrosity at the time of iftar. You know, and then at the night, you can't give 20 minutes. You can't give 15 minutes. You can't even wake up for 10 seconds. You can't even, sometimes, you don't want to wake up at the tahajjud, just wake up a bit early before suhoor. Just wake up an extra 20 minutes early and doing a bit of worship then. But you can't do that. But the suhoor itself, oh, yeah, I'll eat 20 minutes early. You know, a reflection for myself. Now, this is Imam Sha'rani. He's just reflecting on fasting. So we're carrying on. There's other points now he's going to make. One of the benefits of fasting is that it restricts the pathways of Satan within the fasting person's body and becomes for him as a shield. It protects you. Now, it becomes a shield in a multiplicity of ways. One is that you have this heightened sense. It's like a protective force, like a force field around you, because you're in this enhanced state of ibadah. You're in a state of worship. So you feel, you know, there's a lot of things now. You're second guessing yourself. Because I'm different today. I'm trying to do this thing called taqwa. I'm trying to have God consciousness. So that's a shield in a way as well. But here he's actually saying, no, it's like a physical shield, because literally the devil, because you're not eating, all the ways that the devil normally manipulates you, those entry points have all been restricted, because you're not just fasting of the body, you're doing the fasting of the senses. You're trying to enhance the fast. You're in the, you're in the divine presence. That's the nature of the fasting presence. He's in hadra ilahiyya. He is in the presence of God. That's why when somebody tries to fight you, Allahumma inni sa'im, I'm fasting. I'm not part of your world. I'm not part of your reality of emotionless, loss of control. I'm here. I'm in God. I'm anchored right now. So you're not going to take me anywhere. Each fast done on a particular day will serve as a shield that protects the fasting person until the next time that day comes around, each in its own way. So look at the layers of protection. Ramadan will protect from one Ramadan to the next. The Monday fast from Monday to Monday. Thursday to Thursday. The white days to the next white days. To the sacred months, i.e. the months of, the Ashhurul Hurum, the 4 sacred months. They're gonna, Muharram being one of them, these will protect you from one sacred month to the next. The Ashura will protect you from one Ashura to the next. The day of Arafah, the 9th of Dhul-Hijjah, will protect you from one 9th of Dhul-Hijjah to the next. Each parameter, this is Imam Sha'rani, each parameter guarantees protection against specific things. Now, what are those things? We don't know. But each fast now has put another layer of protection over you. And the more you fast and you just collate and you're getting them in, those layers of protection are just increasing. And then the higher the level of protection, Shaitan has no way of breaching these perimeters and whispering to the servant in them, as he does with other pious works like prayers, zakat, hajj, ablution, bowing and prostration. Now what he's saying, now the thing is, and Imam Ibn Rajab spoke of this too, it's the multiplicity of obedience though. Like you're fasting, but you're also reading Quran. You're reading the Quran in the prayer. And the prayer you're praying happens to be the Asr prayer of, which is, according to many ulama, that's the Salatul Wusta. And then, etc., etc. So you're just combining good deeds, and then on top of that, the fast has its own layer of protection. So it's just this. You're just drowning in divine protection. The worship is protection. It protects you in this life, it protects you from the shaitan, and it protects you from the punishment of the hereafter and the grave. And this is the hadith that he bases this on, Imam Sha'rani, the 5 daily prayers, one Friday prayer to the next, and one Ramadan to the next Ramadan. All of these expiate the sins committed in between them, so long as the enormities are avoided, i.e. the major sins. Now, you can't go around killing people and say, oh yeah, but I fasted, so I'm going to get forgiven. No, but he means you have to, each of these have modes. Worship is protection. The worship of Allah, because you're in divine presence. There was this video I saw, like this Russian lady, and she's like, oh, I do black magic. She goes, I can't touch the Muslims. Why? Because they recite Quran and they have remembrance of Allah. And so I try, and it just doesn't hit them. And on Laylatul Qadr, one of the signs of Laylatul Qadr that we're going to look at with Imam Rajab al-Ḥanbalī is that the sihr of the sahir stops working. Their magic doesn't work. Because it's a night of God's power. And when you're in the worship of Allah, you're under God's protection. Jalla fil ula. Okay, now this is Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani. He's going to spend quite a bit of time on this, but we'll move through it quite quickly. the etiquette of breaking the fast. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, it is enough for the son of Adam to eat a small number of morsels, luqaymat, to keep his back straight, to keep his back upright. Because if you don't eat, we don't even understand this because we've never been hungry. But if, that's another thing. The Sahaba, they felt hunger. And Imam al-Ghazali says children sometimes should be made to feel some level of hunger. They should have, and he says you shouldn't give them luxurious foods and all of this thing. This is the Ghazalian way, and he's right. And we need to somehow reconcile that and balance it with the modern world we inhabit. But still, to hear the Prophet ﷺ is saying it's enough to do luqaymat, small morsels. The luqayma is already a small morsel. It's not a luqma, it's a luqayma. And then he's saying that you need just a few morsels to keep your back upright, because if you're hungry, your back starts to hunch. Okay? And so that's all you need to do, is eat enough that your stomach, you're not bending over in hunger. Now here is Imam Sha'rani's analysis. He says the luqaymat is the plural of the luqma. Okay, it's the plural of the luqma. According to the scholars of language, what is a plural? Plural means 3 to 9. It's a type of plural that indicates 3 to 9. Therefore, this is Imam Sha'rani. Yeah? I don't want. Yeah, this is proper Sufi stuff. Whenever a person brings out more than 9 morsels to someone breaking the fast in his company, he has treated him badly and no reward remains for his act of feeding his guest. This is Imam Sha'rani said, because he has transgressed the limits of the Sunnah. Now that's a strict position. I'm not going to say that when somebody comes to open the fast, you need to, this is what he's saying. Because when you gorge him and then he's going to now, you've defeated the purpose of the fast, you are complicit. The Prophet, as-siyamu junnah, fasting is a shield. إِذَا لَمْ تَخْتَرِقْهَا, as long as you don't rip the shield. Fasting is a shield. As long as you don't rip the shield. Like, you need to protect the shield to the best of your ability. And so look, he's got reflections on this. It is from the propriety, the adab of the believer. This is it. He's saying it's the brother of Imam Sha'rani. This must be from Shaykh Abdul Aziz Suraqa. It is from the propriety of the believer that when fasting people break their fast in his company, that he should not sate them with food as is customary, but should rather sate them according to the Sunnah. Feed them like the Prophet ﷺ ate. You should. That's what he said. You should experience that. That's what you should be experiencing in Ramadan. The Prophet's fast, the Prophet's eating. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what we should be aiming for. But instead, suddenly, look how many, it's so many portions and morsels and eating and eating and eating, and first iftar, second iftar, third iftar, fourth iftar, eat again after you come back from Taraweeh, go out and eat, come back, then have suhoor, then have this, then have that, and it's just constant eating. Right now, the fast isn't even that long. I remember what my brother Asir was saying, one of the brothers, he's saying, it's suhoor, you miss a meal, iftar, it's done. You miss one meal, you're missing lunch, essentially. That's it. Ali al-Khawwas, this is the Shaykh of Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani. Beware of giving a guest in Ramadan more than a single flatbread. One piece of bread, one naan, as the tribal elders and others do, meaning that they give, I don't know if they give more or they give the bread, but you shouldn't give more than that out of fear that he will be offended. Now, if he gets offended, this is what he's going to say now, because they get offended. You can't, when somebody comes to your house with iftar, you give them a piece of bread. If you do not give them his, if you out of fear that he will be offended if you do not give him his fill. But if the reality of your action was to be unveiled to him, he would kiss your feet and say, "May Allah reward you with goodness on my behalf. But you did not give my soiled ego its share of desire, and you instead strove to perfect its fast." Just defeating the purpose of the fast, you know. Ibrahim al-Matlubi would give those breaking their fast less than what they were accustomed to eating. So one day some of them issued a complaint against him to the Naqib al-Ashraf, the man whose job it is to look after the Ahl al-Bayt. He said, though you may complain about him in this life, you will thank him in the next. And then he says, this can only be practiced by one who has discarded the habits of human nature and given up ingratiating his behavior with others and entered the vast expanse of the Sharia, and sincere works done for Allah alone, such that his concern for his fellow Muslim is stronger than his concern for his own self. We're just going to keep moving. Again, this is the Majdoob, Ibrahim Aswad the Majdoob said, may by Allah the fasts of these Muslims are invalid because they break their fast with meat and sweets and other delights. As far as I am concerned, there is no fast save that of the folk who break their fast with oil or vinegar or the like. Allahu Alam, you know, this is, all I'm trying to tell you is that there has to, this is what Imam Ghazali, both Imam al-Ghazali and Imam Sha'rani are saying. You have to rethink how you deal with food in the month of Ramadan. You even like the food we eat, it's just it's all processed, it's all rubbish, it's just so unhealthy. It's carcinogens now. A lot of what they don't know where the cancers are coming from. There's probably lifestyle changes. We've left our ways of being. We've inhabited these new ways of being. We're so disconnected from the food that we eat. We don't grow it. We don't slaughter the animals. The way the animals are looked after in the Karima session, I'll go into a lot more detail. In the family in the Quran session, I went into a lot of detail. There's these battery farming, there's horrible dhulm that's done against these creatures, and then just so we can gorge ourselves, and then you eat so much, and then you can't concentrate on worship. You have no brain power, because fasting gives you focus, and then suddenly you've eaten too much, and now you just want to laze there and read Quran. You can't even, this is another crazy thing. We can't even read a book. Like people can't even read Harry Potter. That's, I saw this one thing, brothers like, I haven't watched a movie in so long because I can't concentrate. There was a time where you'd say, okay, brother, you need to read Tafsir X, Y, Z. Now it's like, okay, brother, please read Harry Potter. Oh, I can't read that. Okay, watch the movie. I can't even watch the movie. Okay, you watch this 20-second TikTok instead. And so this culture of gorging, because like the Imams are saying, it translates everywhere. It's not like you don't live in isolation. It's not like your food and how you eat and how you deal with the table is not going to have an effect on the rest of your life. And suddenly you become a gorger. You're a consumer. Everything is about just filling your stomach with food and with content and with whatever you can find. And and the whole system has to cater to your ego and the desire and the worship of self. And this is horrific. This is actually quite terrible. And so this is what they're saying, that at least, and Ramadan becomes that one place where you can you stay away from that. It's the resistance. It's the place of protection. It's the escape. It's the escape from all of this. And somehow we've let it come into the escape zone. Like we're in this space, we've managed to run away from the enemy, and we've got to this corner, and we're here in hiding, and now we're going to do this thing. We're not going to eat. We're the gorging, the selfishness, the devil, everything. Nobody's allowed in. There's no entry zone. And then suddenly, we're like, oh yeah, come in. Yeah, why? You might as well come in. And then we let him come in, and then we just gorge ourselves all over again. And there's no difference. There has to be a tangible difference between your Ramadan and that which is outside of Ramadan. One should let a certain degree of weakness carry over into the night. You should walk into the night prayer. This is Imam al-Ghazali, making it easier, because then you can't pray at night if you've eaten too much, to recite the awrad. He says, may Allah make it so, it may be then that the Satan will not hover over one's heart, and that one will behold the kingdom of heaven. Because he says that's what should happen on Laylat al-Qadr. You behold the kingdom of God. You can't behold the kingdom of God if you're too busy thinking about burgers. You're just food fixation. You're just so connected to dunya. You're just so connected to the mundane. And the hadith we're going to come to later, the Prophet ﷺ, he wouldn't eat suhoor. He wouldn't eat iftar. He would open his fast at suhoor time. His suhoor would be his iftar, because he didn't want to miss a moment of what Ramadan had to offer. Because he knew this was invaluable. This was the most amazing time of the year. The Salaf and the Sahaba, they would crave. Imam Sha'rani, we're going to read, we've read 2 Qur'ans a day, 2 khatmas of Qur'an a day they were able to do. I'll tell you this, Imam Sha'rani wasn't hosting iftar parties and gorging himself on food, radiyallahu anhu. And again, it's the balance. You have to, I can't deny, some of the culture, you have to let the culture live. It has to exist. It's fine. But the fact is, it's just taken over Ramadan. Ramadan has become all about that. That's the problem. That's the problem. That's the fixation. But the Ahlul Islam, for them, Ramadan has just become about food. While we have brothers and sisters starving in Gaza. We have people starving in Sudan. And here, suddenly, somehow in the name of religious practice, we're just eating like animals. The night of destiny, Laylat al-Qadr, represents the night on which something of this kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, is revealed. This is what is meant by the words of Allah, Inna anzalnahu fi Laylat al-Qadr, we revealed the kingdom of heaven. That's Imam al-Ghazali, he's saying that's the who. Quran, yes, but what is the Quran? The Quran is a reflection of the kingdom of heaven. Anyone who puts a bag of food between his heart and his breast becomes blind to this revelation. That's another thing. What is Ramadan meant to be about? It's about the Quran. There should be no distractions. Instead, then the food becomes a distraction. Not just that you're so fixated on it, thinking about it all the time, but also the fact that you eat too much, and you can't even recite Quran. You can't recite Quran. And then if you do recite Quran, you've eaten so much that it's a veil now. It's blocking inner meanings, because hunger allows inner meanings to develop, because the ego is weak. And the soul is now able to, that your soul begins to read the Quran. It's like your soul hasn't read the Quran before, because the ego has taken over. And that is why you can't read the Quran, or you don't find it interesting, or you can't, there's no deeper meanings, or you get bored of it. Suddenly now you can, if people knew the reality of the Quran, the Imams of the Salaf would say they would never get bored of it. You have to empty the mind of everything of Allah but Allah, to empty the body of everything but Allah. Even the food you eat, you only eat it for the sake of Allah. You eat it so it can strengthen you for the ibadah of Allah, because all that matters is remembrance of God. That is the entire matter, and the starting point of it all. The starting point of it all is cutting down on food. Imam al-Ghazali really is fixated on food. In a good way, not in the bad way we're talking about. He has a book, Kitab Adab al-Akal, the book on the etiquette of eating, the book on breaking the desire for food, Kasr al-Shahwatain. And then he has the book on the secrets of fasting. And obviously we're reading from the secrets of fasting, but he talks about food a lot, because he really feels food has become the critical problem of the age for him in a lot of ways. Or it was symbolic of a lot of the problems Muslims have with ego and nafs and all of the other stuff, and expectations, food expectations. Like complaining about food. You know, all of these things, these are not from the Sunnah of the Prophet Ali. So he never complained about food. If he didn't like it, he didn't eat it. And these we'll talk about. I've got a class, inshallah, in a couple of days, we'll talk about it. But by the time this comes out, that class will be recorded. The friends of Allah are more concerned for the servants than the servants are for themselves. Ali al-Khawas. This is him saying that when people come to your house, you feed them what they need to eat. And that's another thing. You shouldn't, like, you invite somebody to your house, you're going to do iftar together, because it's good to do iftar with people. I'm not saying that, by the way. You should have some level of iftar with people. You should, it'am is good. If you feed a fasting person, you get the reward of the fast. So these are good things. The Salaf and the Sahaba used to open their fast with people. This is all good. But it shouldn't be that it becomes a torture for the people whose whole day is spent cooking that food, who have Quran. You know, the women folk of our family, this is a fact, yeah? I say this from my mother, my grandmother, may Allah have mercy on her. These were people of Quran. They used to recite, my mum recites Quran every single day. My grandmother used to recite Quran. They recite more Quran than the men in the family. And then suddenly they've been chained to the kitchen. Now, should women cook for their families? Of course they should. I believe this. I don't care what people say. And that is the nature of the wives of the Prophet. This is true. The women should cook, and the men should carry out their male duties. But is that all they're there for? The month of Ramadan doesn't mean anything to them. They don't have Quran to recite. They don't have dhikr that they want to do. They don't want to contemplate all of that. And they're like, oh yeah, but you're cooking for your family. Well, if it's such ibadah, then why don't you do it? Family duties are ibadah. This is true. But then suddenly, it's like outside of Ramadan, they would never be expected to do this. Then in Ramadan, suddenly they have to cook so much more to facilitate the gorging that's about to take place. That's just not feasible. If there was some real need, that the family needs something, then the woman is expected to do it. Of course she is. And the man is expected to do his duties. Of course they are. But the fact is, if it becomes the whole day, just becomes, oh, you didn't make this, you didn't make that, this is what we were meant to eat, this is what you meant to eat, and there's just all of this, then this is a major problem. This is a major problem. And you have to just give them breathing space, you know? The goal of fasting, and this is a good, I think we're coming to an end now, inshallah. The goal of fasting is the acquisition of one of the qualities of Allah. Sanadiyya, steadfastness. No, not being in need, as well as following the example of the angels by abstaining as far as possible from the desires of the flesh. For they are immune to such passions. You enter into the angelic the angelic form. That's what you do. And that's why you have unveilings, because you are now in the realm of the unseen. And Laylat al-Qadr, Salam, al-Biqari, he says, what is Salam? Salam is paradise. He says, that's it, that night becomes the night of paradise. Animals are ruled by appetite and lust. They have no control. They just want to eat more. But humans and angels are the best, but they have no control. They have no free will. Yet us, what we have, we're superior to animals in the sense that we have reason, we can control ourselves, yet we're subject to these forces, and that's why we fall so many times. But Ramadan becomes the month in which you can transcend and enter into the angelic reality. And so whenever man, this is Imam al-Ghazali, falls prey to lust, he sinks to the lowest of the low and joins the animal herd. You just become like a pig. He literally says this in some places. He says you become a man who worships the pig. Whenever he curbs his desires, he ascends to the highest of the high and attains the angelic level. The angels are near the presence of Allah. So those who follow their example and model themselves on their character will likewise draw near to Allah. To resemble one who is near is to be near. This nearness, however, is not spatial or qualitative. This is Aqidah point. But he's saying you're like the angels who are at the throne of God. You know, I don't know what this means because I've never been there. But this is what he's saying. This is what should be happening when you're fasting. This is why you should be treating the way you treat people just becomes better. The way you treat yourself becomes better. The way you treat the Quran, reorientation, everything takes place. Al-Hasan ibn Abil Hasan al-Basri once passed a group of people who were laughing merrily. He said, Allah, great and glorious is He, has made the month of Ramadan a race course on which His creatures compete in His worship. Some have come in first and won, while others have lagged behind and lost. And this is near the end of Ramadan. It is absolutely amazing to find anybody laughing and playing about on the day when success attends the victors and failure the wastrels. By Allah, if the veil were lifted off, the doer of good would surely be preoccupied with his good works and the evildoer with his evil deeds. This is at the end of Ramadan. He's saying you should be worried about how it went. You should be thinking, I did good, that's the khair, and you're happy because of that. Or even the good deeds you do, you think, were they as good as I expected them to be? Could I have done better? What am I going to do next in Ramadan? You miss it. There should be a sadness. At the very least, you should be sad. We'll read the chapter, the farewell to Ramadan that Ibn Rajab has. It's very powerful. It's very emotional. Like you just see, Ramadan goes. People don't realize the happiness we have when Ramadan comes. When it goes, the sadness the believer feels. Because you ain't going to get this back now till next year. That feeling of closeness to Allah. You feel like Abdullah. You feel like you were a slave of God for 30 days. You did your best. And then you try to replicate it, and you're not meant to replicate it in its entirety outside of Ramadan, because if we did, we'd be walking with angels. But in Ramadan, we walk with angels. We become angels. We witness angels. But we've got to take it seriously. He's saying this here. Occupy yourself with your deeds. What deeds are you doing? What is the goodness? What is the evil? What Quran have you recited? What is your closeness to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What unveilings have you had? In other words, the man whose fast has been accepted will be too full of joy to indulge in idle sport, while for one who has suffered rejection, laughter will be precluded by remorse. Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais, he was once told, you are an aged elder, fasting would enfeeble you. He replied, by this I am making ready for a long journey. Obedience to Allah is easier to endure than His punishment. This is many of our elders. They're just people in the most difficult circumstances. They will still insist on fasting. In the midst of ill health and all of the things, everybody say, you don't need to fast, you're exempt, you don't need to, whatever. They'll still insist that they need to fast. Now, is that a good thing? I don't know. Not always, because it could really hurt them physically. But at the same time, you have to admire their tenaciousness. Just incredibly devout people. And this is the example of Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais. I think he was the Khadim of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, if I remember correctly. And so this is the closing reflections for today's session. The complete fast combines the ordinary fast. Level 1, the fast of the normal person, just no food, drink, and sexual relations. Then you enter into the fast of the senses, the 6 requirements, and we read them in the last session. Then the extra special fast that I can only dream of. The heart, the fasting of the heart, that you nothing except Allah. All you think about is Allah. All you see is Allah. How much should you eat at iftar? 3 to 9 morsels, according to Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani. I'm saying you should still eat. But at least go Ghazali on this. Eat how you would have eaten outside. Maybe have a little bit more. Maybe make a slight adjustment to the diet. That's it. To the extent, here's how you need to always think about it. How will it affect my worship? Because if you don't eat anything, by the way, if you starve yourself, and then you're like super hungry, you can't even stand upright, then you've hurt your worship. So nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that you do not sacrifice the worship. But if you eat too much, you also sacrifice the worship. So you have to find the balance that allows you to worship Allah to the best of your ability. That's it. So it doesn't have to be 3 to 9 morsels. It's your sunnah. It's the sunnah that is best for you in that moment. Whatever will strengthen you for worship. Because we can't handle that. Suddenly Ramadan comes in, you start eating like the Prophet ﷺ entirely. You're going to really struggle. But you need to try to embody some of it to the best of your ability. Extra hunger. There should be some level of extra hunger beyond normal to restrict shaitan. Otherwise, you're letting him back in, and your Ramadan will be worse than outside of Ramadan. That's what Imams Sha'rani says. Preparation for Laylatul Qadr, all of this is preparation for Laylatul Qadr. If you're not preparing, if you're not witnessing, if you're not getting yourself ready and you miss it, then the Prophet ﷺ said, أو كما قال أو من حرم ليلة القدر حرم الخير كله. Whosoever is deprived of Laylatul Qadr, he is deprived of all good. There's no good. Nothing left. There's nothing. He has achieved nothing. How many who fast are not keeping fast, and how many who do not keep fast are fasting? The fasting non-fast is he who keeps his limbs pure of sin while still eating and drinking. The non-fasting fast is he who goes hungry and thirsty while giving full license to his limbs and his organs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our faults, to elevate us and allow us to become angelic to the best of our ability in this month. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to recognize him and only him, to fast with the limbs and the body and the mouth and the heart and all of the parts of the body and the soul. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward Imam al-Ghazali and Imam al-Sha'rani for their incredible offerings and their wisdoms. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our next session inshallah we'll read from Shaykh al-Hasan al-Nadwi rahmatullahi alayhi and his reflections on fasting. Some of it will be similar, but he has some extra information that's quite beneficial. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the Wise English Academy, Sidi Yahya Bata, Brother Mullah Muhammad Salman. He facilitate these sessions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the Ummah, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask Allah to allow our fast to be soulful fast, spiritual fast, heartful fast, fasts that are true to the meaning of what it means to fast. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send abundant salutations and blessings upon Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.